Hello and welcome to Bharat I am Brigadier Chatterjee. We are going to be talking about the Wagner Group. The Wagner Group is a group of people, whether they're terrorists, whether they're insurgents, whether they're mercenaries, is something that we'll try and find out. But this group is fighting the war in Ukraine alongside the Russian troops. So that makes it very important in the battlefield there, the kind of results that they can possibly produce. So we'll get to the details of this group's operation, its construct, and how is it being employed. To put us through the paces, I have with me Colonel Rajneesh. Colonel Rajneesh, welcome to Bharat Thank you for sparing your time for it.
Thank you very much, sir. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Colonel Rajneesh, if we can go over the issues involved in this discussion on Wagner Group. The first issue I have is, could you give us an overview of the Wagner Group? Are they terrorists, like I just said? Are they insurgents? Are they a force created by the Russians? What is really this Wagner Group that's fighting alongside the Russians in Ukraine?
Wagner, as far as Wagner is concerned, to understand that, we have to see mercenaries have been around ever since the time of recorded history and organized warfare. In the more recent times, mercenaries have come up in Africa during the wars of decolonization and subsequent civil wars. As far as Russia is concerned, we have to go back to the 1990s when, after the breakup of Soviet Union, armed groups emerged in post-Soviet Russia who fought for the Russian nationalist interest. President Putin, when he came to power, he supported the rise of private military companies, and he in fact maintained an opaque relationship with them because it helped him further the Russian interest as also the interest of the elites who were associated with his regime. It was around 2013, interestingly, the Russian chief of staff, he wrote a 2,000-word article, The Value of Science is in Vision, in which he came out with a new theory of warfare. He emphasized the use of non-military means to achieve strategic objectives for the Russian state. It was also the time, around the early years of the last decade, that US was withdrawing from Middle East and Africa. This provided the Russians with an opportunity to increase their presence in these parts of the world. Interestingly, around 2013-14, a businessman by the name of Yevgeny Prigozhin, he established a private military company, which we now know as Wagner. It was established by him. Now, coming to your question specific as to what exactly is Wagner and how can I define Wagner, it's slightly complicated. Wagner is a very complex and diffused organization with an overlapping structures. And it's because of this reason, some analysts have even gone to the extent of suggesting that there is no Wagner. To put it simply, it's a group of businesses with and also a group of mercenaries which are linked together by overlapping business interests and logistic net. Put it simply, it's complex, it's diffused, it has overlapping structures.
Right. Let's go a little further. You see, the leadership of the group matters a lot, and you talked about this gentleman, Yevgeny Prigozhin, as also there's possibly a Russian military officer, Dmitry, who's also linked with the Wagner Group. In fact, he's one of the top leaders. If you can give us an idea about these two people, their backgrounds, then possibly we will be able to get an insight into what is the group capable of really.
Prigozhin is a very interesting personality. He was a businessman with a criminal background. In fact, in 1979, when he was aged 18 years old, that was the first time he received his criminal conviction, the first criminal conviction. And 2 years later, he was sentenced to 13 years in prison, of which he served 9 years before coming out. Once he was released from prison, Prigozhin went to establish a chain of hot dog stalls And it was also a time when he started establishing contacts with the elites of St. Petersburg. And incidentally, President Putin also hails from St. Petersburg. And it was when he was establishing contacts with these gentlemen, he developed contact with President to the extent that President started trusting him with some very sensitive assignments. And one of them was to raise the Wagner. Later on, along with the other Russian officer, the armed forces officer, Dmitry Utkin, who you just mentioned. Dmitry Utkin is a former army officer who served in their special forces spetsnaz. It is reported that he possibly fought 2 Chechen wars, and he retired in the rank of lieutenant colonel. Dmitry Utkin, in fact, the name Wagner comes from the call sign of Dmitry Utkin. It was possibly his call sign or nickname, and today we know the group by the name of Wagner. Dmitry Utkin was pivotal in organizing this group, and moreover, it was his military experience which provided the combat potential, which actually generated the combat potential of this organization.
Right, sir. Though they have had a long relationship, like it comes out with Putin, especially. It appears there's a saying, or there's information floating around that actually speaking, the Wagner leader was a chef of Putin also. That kind of a thing that's come out. But notwithstanding that, so what's the relationship now with Putin being the government really? What's the relationship of the Wagner Group and the government?
To come to your first comment as to Yevgeny Prigozhin being referred to as Putin's chef. Interestingly, when Prigozhin started his hot dog stall, and subsequently it became he expanded his business. He also established a company, a catering company by the name of Concord Catering. And Concord Catering was awarded a contract to provide catering services to the Kremlin. And that is how Prigozhin was given the title of, or he came to be known as Putin's chef. As far as the relationship is concerned, before the war, we understand that Wagner is participating on behalf of Russia in eastern Ukraine. But before the war, Wagner was, the Russian government denied any link with the group. It always referred to as private entity. Of course, now things have changed. And there are analysts, researchers who actually link the Wagner with the Russian establishment. In fact, they forward 2 arguments for that. And the first one is Wagner is largely manned by former Russian military personnel, and more specifically, their special forces personnel. Of course, there is a very tenuous connection that is being maintained, but it does provide some kind of common background between the 2 groups. The second point that is forwarded, argument which is forwarded in support of this theory, is that all the operations of Wagner are actually aligned with the strategic interest of Russian state. Wagner has been operating in Syria, in Libya, in Ukraine. These are places where Russia has geopolitical, economic, as also political interests. And because of these reasons, it is at times alluded that Wagner is a proxy force which furthers Russian interest. Of course, with the war, ongoing war in Ukraine, and things have come out very clearly that Wagner is participating on behalf of the Russians. As also, Wagner is dependent on the Russian state for logistic support, as also the operational support. But the command and control continues to remain very, very fuzzy and nebulous. That's the state we are in. And that's the kind of relationship which can be said about the two entities.
And the next issue that I have, which is getting difficult even for the Russians to find the manpower to send up front for the fight that's going on. And Wagner doesn't seem to have, or if it has a problem, then we do not know about it. So what's the recruitment base like? What's the policy like? How are they employed, these people?
Wagner has, by and large, in the initial days when it came up, was manned by former military officers as also convicts. A typical Wagner recruit would be a middle-aged man, middle-aged former service personnel, anything between 35 to 37 years old. He has a family. He has possibly a failing business and a pending loan. And normally he comes from a economically depressed area. And because of these reasons, he has been attracted to Wagner for a prospect of a lucrative salary. So that was the kind of profile one would say of a recruit in the initial days when the Wagner was established. However, commanders come from a very different strand. The commanders are the link between the Russian state and the group. They provide mission they actually they plan their mission based on the objectives of the Russian state provided to them through the GRU and the military GRU, which is the military intelligence, and the FSB. So that's the kind of profile that we are looking at.
Okay. So obviously the command and control elements are very important, since this group is the one which is going to execute the policies of the Russian government. So give us an idea about the command and control setup of this group as such.
In fact, Wagner follows a hybrid model. It has a state as well as non-state actors. When it comes to the non-state actors, I have spoken about Yevgeny Prigozhin, who you may call as the chief executive officer, the CMD of the company. Yevgeny Prigozhin, as I mentioned, established Wagner somewhere around 2013 and 14. It was also the time when he established his company Concord Catering, and Concord Catering was awarded lucrative contracts by the Kremlin. And one of which I had mentioned was catering services to the Kremlin. In addition to that, between 2012 and 2019, he was awarded very lucrative contracts to provide supplies to Russian armed forces as also to the state-run schools. So between these, in these years, 2012 to 2019, it is reported that Wagner was provided with almost $2.2 billion worth of money. And a portion of that went into establishing the bank. Now, as far as non-state actors are concerned, the state actors, as I mentioned, there is a very tenuous connection. But somewhere around 2016, news started filtering into the media of some sort of connection between Wagner and the state. It was on 9th December 2016, during a function which was held in the Kremlin. Wagner commanders were awarded the Order of Courage. One of them was Dmitry Utkin. The second time Wagner was mentioned in the media was in 2018. During a press conference, Putin actually accepted the presence of Wagner, and he in fact went on to suggest that Wagner can operate anywhere around the world, provided it does not break the rules of the Russian Federation. So that is what is the command and control structure at the highest level. But when it comes to the operational level, there has been a study which has been done by a James Hong Foundation, a 2019 study, which actually studies the command and control structure at the operational level. It suggests a three-layered organization which follows the template of the Russian armed forces. At the top level, you have the CMD and the commander-in-chief. At the middle level, you have the general staff, the controlling staff, the logistics staff, and you have the soldiers at the bottom. So that's how they have been organized, and it allows Wagner to operate independently in combat as also in conjunction with the armed forces.
Right, one more question about this operation is part of it. I'm now interested in the tactics that they employ. What is the kind of tactics that they employ? Will they have one in certain places? So perhaps there's a reason to go into it.
In fact, as far as the tactics is concerned, it became quite evident in the manner the Wagner has been employed in eastern Ukraine. Eastern Ukraine, we know, they have been fighting in Bakhmut. And Bakhmut, if you see, defies all military logic. In Battle of Bakhmut, both Ukrainians as well as Russians have suffered tens and thousands of casualties. It's what has been seen. It's not how a regular army is normally employed. The Wagner troops, who incidentally, before the war, Prigozhin went around the various Russian prisons, and it is reported that he recruited almost 50,000 prisoners for the war. In fact, he lowered the standards of his recruitment, wherein he even recruited prisoners who were suffering from diseases like hepatitis C and HIV. And these recruits are made to wear different color bracelets, and then they are deployed. So in fact, the recruitment standards that we see prioritizes numbers over, quality and experience. Now, coming to your specific question of how Wagner has been employed. And in Bakhmut, we have seen that these members, the Wagners, have been employed in almost medieval fashion. They have been given a target. These Wagner members advance, capture, but if the attack fails, they are not permitted to fall back. They have been used in human wave tactics, and in one particular incident, it has been reported that almost 18 human waves were launched in a period of 24 hours against one trench. Now, that is not how you employ a regular military, but it is definitely indicative of the fact how some decision makers tend to employ a gray zone force in a conventional war.
Okay, one last question, and that's we've heard of a little bit of tension between the senior hierarchy of the ministry, defense ministry, let's say, of the Russians, as also the Wagner Group, which come out in the open also. Keep that in view and tell us a bit about it, and also, will that influence future employment of the group?
To understand the future of Wagner, and of course Prigozhin, who heads Wagner, one has to study how this war is progressing for the Russians. Wagner has been, in fact, the Russians have been attempting to capture Bakhmut since August 2022. It was only in January when they were able to capture Soledar, and it's only recently in May when the Russians announced they have been able to capture Bakhmut. But in January, after Soledar was captured, that was when the tensions between Wagner and the Russian Defense Ministry came out in open. There were claims and counterclaims to claim credit for the capture of the city of Soledar. And in fact, it became so murky that on 5th May, Yevgeny Prigozhin released a series of videos wherein he almost abused the Russian defense minister and chief of general staff. He even announced that his group would withdraw from Bakhmut by 10th of May, and that is because he was being denied supplies and ammunition. It was a blackmailing tactics, and in this he was supported by a Chechen warlord, Ramzan Kadyrov. So two of them actually blackmailed the Russian Defense Ministry, and on 7th of May, we had Yevgeny Prigozhin announcing that he has received orders from the Russian Defense Ministry saying that the supplies would be restarted. And for that, General Surovikin has been appointed to ensure that Wagner gets uninterrupted supply. Now, this announcement had multiple implications. It actually suggests that General Chief of Staff, General Gerasimov, as also the Defense Minister, has lost command and authority over the Wagner. It's also indicative of the fact that if the Russian Defense Ministry has to negotiate with Wagner, and I'm using term negotiate, which is actually you don't negotiate with your subordinates, especially during wartime. And that's what the situation is today. And that's what is indicative of the kind of tensions between the two groups. So that is where we stand as of.
Okay.
Now, coming to the future, as far as the future of Wagner is concerned, as also Prigozhin, it depends on the continued utility of the group to Putin.
Of course.
As on date, Wagner has proved to be useful, and it has delivered where the Russian military has not been able to do that. So it is quite likely, it is anticipated, that, and of course it is supported by the announcements that Prigozhin has made. And one of them is that he would now raise a new organization which would be based on ideology. And for that, he would recruit personnel from schools, colleges, and sports clubs. So possible, it's quite possible that Wagner may reinvent itself and come out as a new organization, of course, within the limits set by the Russian state.
Right.
As far as Prigozhin is concerned, Prigozhin has indicated that he is ambitious. He may have a political ambition, but President Putin is not known to suffer challenges. He in fact, he's known to get people, those who are close to him, in and out of favor. And it is quite possible that Yevgeny Prigozhin may be offered a lucrative appointment, of course with necessary security and intelligence check, and he may be sidelined. So that's one of the possibility that can happen in case he loses out of favor of President.
Right. Thank you so much, Colonel Rajneesh. Thank you so much for having spared your time, joined us, and an excellent, I would say, talk on Wagner.
Thank you very much, and it was a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you. And thank you, viewers. Thanks for joining us. Do join in like this now and then. Do also visit our social media pages, like us, and let us know if there are any topics that you want us to take up. Thank you.